Welcome back to another episode of Foolproof Theology. My name is Chase Davis, and I'm your host. Today on the show, we're going to have a great conversation about tariffs. I know it seems out of left field, you might say, but there's a lot of people talking about this kind of stuff today with Trump's tariffs against Canada, Mexico, China. Looks like Canada and Mexico have already folded, so I wanted to have somebody on the show today that could help us understand tariffs a little bit better, a good Christian man who can educate us. Before we get into that conversation with Ron Dodson, I wanted to make sure you knew about the Patreon. You can head over to the Patreon in the show notes and sign up for $5, $15 a month. It's a great way to support the program, help me bring great content to you. You can also get free swag, early access to every episode I release if you sign up today. So sign up on the Patreon, support the program. Let's get into the conversation with Ronald Dodson. With you here today, we're going to talk with Ron Dodson. He's down in Dallas, Texas, a hedge fund manager. I believe that's the accurate title, although Ron's kind of a jack of all trades, talking about all sorts of stuff. So, Ron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking, Chase, and it's good to talk to you.
Absolutely. What's kind of like a summary if somebody's like, who is this random guy Chase has got on the podcast? How could we help people understand who is Ron Dodson?
Well, I was just down on the corner with a sandwich board that said, we'll do podcasts for food. So, no, I am as far as this, I am a hedge fund manager in statistical volatility arbitrage, but I also manage a family office, and we do stocks and fixed income and the whole nine yards. But my long-term stuff is very nerdy, derivatives, and basically arbing what's called the volatility risk premium. And Believe me, I don't want your listeners to go into complete hypnosis, so I will stop talking about it there. I also write, which is a real passion of mine. I write for most of my stuff gets picked up by American Reformer. They kind of have first crack. And then I have a Substack, and I'm on Twitter at Ron Dodson. But I really, really enjoy reading and writing. And I write about theology and political theology and political philosophy. And a little bit of geopolitics. Have done some work in that area. And then, I've got two girls down at the University of Texas. I know you love that, Chase.
So much.
Hook 'em. One plays soccer, the other is in drew you offside. That's good. And then one's in economics, econometrics, and liberal arts, and I'm very proud of them both. And then I've been married for over 25 years to my beautiful and devout wife, who's Canadian. So kind of apropos for our talk today.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, and it's funny. I think we could do it might take a few hours. I don't know if you remember, I had an episode on Bitcoin because it was like a foreign language. And all the words you said at the top of the episode introducing yourself, I'm like, each one of those things, I'm like, boy, that sounds like Greek to me. And I'd love to kind of get your take on how can we explain it. But how are the stocks doing today? We're recording February 3rd. Things are going well, or things are volatile right now? What is it looking like?
It was a very, very ugly Sunday night and overnight session. We're only down about 0.5% now. Personally, my stuff's doing great.
Good.
So, I think the markets are trying to digest this basically a new paradigm with the executive in America being willing to use tariffs to achieve national goals and ends. And that is, from a purely economic standpoint, that adds a layer of volatility and risk to the market. And so that discounts current prices. Now, we saw already, it looks like the Mexican leadership has caved. And so on the Mexican side of the border, those have been put on moratorium for 30 days. And that really, the market's way off its lows. We were down over 2% overnight. And now, like I said, we're only down about 50 basis points. So market is handling this information well. We'll see how it goes with Canada. that's a much trickier situation. And honestly, generally over time has been a much more faithful ally. Mexico's kind of a failed state, not completely, but kind of, and that has to do with for a lot of reasons that we can talk about. I'd love to talk about that. Canada's a different deal because it's basic. It should be very much aligned with us, but they've had and under the Harper presidency that ended in 2015, that era, Harper was a great ally to the United States. The current president, much, much less so. And so this is as much about that now. So anyway, that being said, that's where the markets are today. And we can kind of take this wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful because the reason I invited you on is, man, I've got group chats and friends and, people in real life talking about tariffs. And,
right.
I'm kind of one of those guys who I voted for this executive. And so, I want to support the move. It's kind of like, it's crazy out there right now. What all is getting shut down. I don't know I'm younger than you, but I can't remember a more consequential in terms of implementation and speed of an agenda administration coming into office. But one of the features is tariffs, and people are asking, I don't know what this is. Is this good or bad? Why are we doing this? They don't really understand. And I'm kind of like, trust the plan, like it'll be fine. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, like I don't know how it affects businesses. I don't know how it affects our market. So maybe like help people understand. Let's start with what are tariffs, and then maybe if we could, I don't know how well versed you are with like a history of it. I have some knowledge on it, but like as far as I know, we used to use tariffs, and then we didn't use them as much. They've always been around, but it's kind of been since the 30s. I think it's been more of a tax the American people, not other countries. But what in general is a tariff? What is getting tariffed from these countries?
Right. Okay. Let's be general and then get as specific as we can without getting too in the weeds. Tariffs break the fallacy that prosperity is only economic.
Okay.
And so it is generally a illiberal position. And what I mean by that is liberalism tends to see everything as everything is very flattened out, that every person is exactly the same kind of an economic unit. Liberal economics, which are generally Keynesian, seek to eliminate any friction between economic entities because what's measurable in prosperity? Well, GDP is measurable. Average income is measurable. But on the right, in kind of the old right, because conservatism since the Buckley Revolution, which was 50s and 60s, has been generally liberal as well. And I'm not speaking left liberalism. I'm speaking of philosophical liberalism. Whereas the old right was prosperity as a measure of a whole bunch of different things. Are people virtuous? Are marriages staying together? Are people practicing the benefits of marriage only within its confines? Or is there generally a practice of the children being more blessed than the parents? This type of idea of prosperity. And those things are painful to measure in a liberal sense because you're going to see disparities among moral agents, right? Those who tend to be more moral and more just and more virtuous will be more prosperous. So, but if we're going to flatten, if everybody's exactly the same, then what we're going to do is measure in the aggregate. So if GDP goes up, it's good. And so tariffs are kind of like a chemotherapy. Is chemotherapy in and of itself as such good for you? No, it's a poison. It generally stops cell growth in order to accomplish a greater good. That which is growing quickest is cancerous. Tariffs are just like this in the sense that, and so strong borders. Is all immigration always and everywhere a bad thing? Of course not. But if let's take it to the chemotherapy example, if the body is taking in poison that's really bad for you, you got to stop that, right? So, and I'm not saying all immigration is poison. That's not the point. This is a metaphor, people.
Yeah.
So tariffs break the fallacy that prosperity is only economic. So in the modern age, prosperity has really been reduced to just economic metrics: GDP growth, stock market performance, the availability of cheap goods. Man, I can get an 85-inch flat screen for $1,500 at Costco. Wow, man, I'm living like a king. But tariffs, when properly applied, really shatter the illusion that economic efficiency is the highest good. So how they work is goods transactions that cross a border, and generally you only have you have control. Really, these are placed when it's coming in. Are that there's just a tax placed on them. So let's say I order. For instance, I just ordered a piece of clothing from Toronto a couple of weeks ago. And as that comes in, then that's under the current Trump, not proposal, it's enacted, it's in effect as of today. Then as it passes customs, a bill is attached to that article of clothing for 25% of the value. And that would go for everything. So the idea is what you're trying to do is increase increase the cost of an economic good from somewhere else, so that the incentive is to participate in the economic goods within your own nation. All right. Ultimately, the purpose can be twofold. Normally, like in the old days, we generated most of our national income from fees and tariffs, and we didn't really have an income tax. Matter of fact, when the income tax wasn't started until 1913, I believe, the Voluntary Tax Act and Amendment, voluntary, and it was 1%. Believe it or not.
Wow.
But so even long after that, the federal government, not state and local, depending on your state, but the federal government was funded through these transactions. That, in other words, in order to gain the protections of the federal government, that is the courts and national defense, generally has how that is understood. This is before the creation of this massive 3-letter zoo that we live in and the huge welfare state and the national social safety net, so to speak. That was all funded via tariffs. It wasn't until really the period, it was under FDR and then in the World War II and then through the Eisenhower era, that you actually got up to, as much as a 90%, maybe even north of 90% marginal tax rate, which is just insane.
It is insane.
But and that was on, and so tariffs were, again, as the country became more liberal in its economic outlook, and this really took on after in the 1960s, the immigration policy changed. You saw with that this idea that we're gonna move to more and more of a free trade basis, not charge anything on this, and really tax the people on their income, which is a progressive system. And with the stair-stepped, the lower income peoples really don't get taxed. It's the upper half that carry 90% of the tax burden. So anyway, that's kind of the history and the idea, and there's arguments, but I've been talking for long. So you have, what do you think so far?
Yeah, that's some great content. And I think, I was looking up what you were talking about with, it looks like the 16th Amendment in 1913, where it says the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment amongst the several states without regard to any census or enumeration. So I think, there is kind of a history back. It looks like the Civil War There were some income taxes, but yeah, that kind of was what I was picking up on, was that the income tax, being progressive in its nature, is more novel in the history of America. At this point, it's old, for most people, but tariffs were a way to get that done. I think one thing, as we're talking about this, I'm immediately going, as a small business owner, okay, so if I import goods, or I'm trying to sell a product in a store, then that's not good news for me, Ron. Why should I be a fan of these tariffs? Like, what is the cancer, I guess, the chemo is trying to treat here, if that's the analogy we want to continue to use?
So we have a generalized aspect, which is costs, any type of cost imposed from outside, and in economics is really biblical. It's one anothering. An arm's length transaction involves both people being better off. So you give me some bread, I give you some milk, we shake hands, and both people get to say thank you, right? So in your store analogy, somebody buys from you a package, a packet of Zen, and they give you money, and both sides are happy, right?
Yeah.
But what the government does at every level, and some is good and some is a lot's not good, but anytime they impose a cost, and that's what tariffs are, a tax, a cost, you disincentivize whatever that transaction or activity is. So we see this in sales taxes, which are both state and local. In most states, you have a state basis and then a local addendum. That disincentivizes, to some level, all transactions, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I would be much happier to buy a car, for instance, in a county that has a lower sales tax, because I'm going to pay less, right? That's why people register their cars in, is it Idaho?
Montana,
Wyoming?
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Montana. There you go.
Yeah.
Because there's basically no fee to it, right? So, and when you have guys who own Ferraris or exotic cars, that's a big chunk. So what tariffs, the goal is you have the big part, which is to disincentivize to a degree the transnational commerce. Okay, and you can either decide that's good or bad. But the focused goals are, in the case of Mexico and Canada, to exert pressure on those governments for our national well-being. So, for instance, in the case of Mexico, in the case of Mexico and Canada, the stated goals, and I think this is largely correct, is we're very concerned about the fentanyl that's been the illicit drug fentanyl that is incredibly addictive. Evidently, I've personally never partaken. That is awful and killing tons of people. It's a ton of it's coming across the Mexican border, and a certain amount's coming across the Canadian border. And these are both coming supposedly from China. And so in imposing a tariff, what we're saying, and you've got to enforce the tariff, okay, because before we had a completely free trade agreement. So basically you've got goods, great, go on through. So when you put a tariff on, you have to enforce it. So now the customs inspection process is much more rigorous, because we have to determine a value. So it becomes more of a policing thing. But the purpose is, hey, Mexico, I don't want any more fentanyl coming in, and I don't want unchecked, XYZ immigration, so on and so forth. I need you to control the border. I need you to make sure we need help in policing. It can't just be us. Otherwise, we're just going to stick the military on the southern border, and we see anything across the deal, we might have to go get it, right?
Yep.
That's the unspoken threat. That hasn't been spoken, but that's the unspoken threat. We're going to militarize our southern border, and even our side, we don't want that. In a perfect world, yeah, we get along great with everybody, and everybody's good, and all this kind of stuff. It hasn't been working that way. So a tariff acts as a levered uh, cudgel against, so we buy a lot more stuff from Mexico and from Canada. Our economy is just a lot bigger than both those sides, right? So when we put a tariff on either one of those other economies, it's impacting them way more than us. So you use it as a lever to try to impose your will for the good of your citizens on them. And so, hey, we've got a lot of citizens dying or being addicted to fentanyl. We don't like that. We also, in the case of both Mexico and Canada, we don't like the transactional games that are happening with Asian products. So how does that work? Well, a product will come in, fish, some canned fruit, packaged fruit, will go to Mexico, then go all the way to China in a lot of cases, and then come back and then get here. And so by the time it comes here, it's we want some of that. We want better visibility into all that, and that's for a lot of reasons. National security. We want to be able to, that's really getting in the weeds. But we want there to be some sanity in that whole supply chain. And speaking of supply chain, we want to reshore some of our supply chain that we're completely dependent upon these other places to go. That goes all the way from cars to drugs to electronic parts and so on and so forth. So this acts as just basically a leverage. Hey, these are the things we want to see on your side of the border. And until we make some progress, we're going to have this big tariff, and it's going to hurt you more than us.
Okay, so you mentioned that one of the hopes is to like reshore or encourage domestic manufacturing growth. Do you think that, like, how much do you think in the political calculus of this is the tariff mainly being used as a lever to pull, like you mentioned, to accomplish certain other goals? Or is it mainly to, oh, there go the markets. We have the same, one of our guys trades. I always hear that in his office. Is it mainly to increase America's prosperity by means of tariffs and taxes instead of the income tax?
Well, this is going to sound kind of Machiavellian,
sure,
and it is. The biggest goal in all this, I mean, obviously we want the fentanyl to stop, and that's going to be the stated goal because that has absolutely visible impact on our citizens. But there's the very real politic aspect of, hey guys, we're the big game in town. This is our hemisphere. It's basically a return to the Monroe Doctrine of, we need you to, what's best for your citizens is going to be best for our citizens. And so kind of an aligning by force. Now, I'm not saying that as to make you feel good about that being reality, but it is. It absolutely is reality. We don't need to be, as a nation, Mexico's is basically a narco failed state in a lot of ways. And part of that is the geography of it. You have in many ways, it's still third world, and the geography and the dispersion of the populace make Mexico a very, very difficult country to govern, especially, and no one has there. It's an unarmed populace. So what you basically do is you give criminals free rein, right?
Yeah.
It's just ruled, especially in the north, in the mountainous regions, it's ruled by narco gangs. So that's one. And we need to tell, the message is, look, we can really destroy you if you don't start playing ball and taking care of things. And then in differing ways, and again, this isn't supposed to be warm and fuzzy, but in different ways in Canada, and we'll see if this works, because Canada is a much trickier thing. It's not third world. It's an advanced economy. There's not very many people. I mean, one of the reasons one of the reasons they've opened up immigration to the ridiculous level they have is they just want more people as a bigger lever back against us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's destroyed. My full disclosure, my wife is Canadian, so I'm kind of honorary Canadian, and I know a lot about the culture and the people, and I have a lot of love. Canada's beautiful, and the heritage Canadians are great people. I don't know what they've been doing. The immigration has gone a long way to destroying kind of that heritage Canada. But anyway, part of the lever that's going on with Trump up there is that they've had, again, under the Harper rule, they were very much aligned with us. Alberta, which is their oil producing area, felt very much like Texas. We were trying to get a pipeline built. And then between Obama getting elected here and Trudeau getting, I almost said Castro.
All right.
Trudeau getting elected in Canada, that just really put a halt to that. So part of this is trying to say, hey, we need you to play ball like you used to. And whether or not, I know Canadians right now are booing the national anthem at NHL and NBA games, the U.S. national anthem. So we'll see how that goes. We can withstand a lot more heat than Canada can. But I want what's best for, I want what's best for the United States citizens, and hopefully we can all get back on the same page. But the quicker Trudeau gets out of there, the better it'll be for everybody.
Yeah, and I've heard that from Canadians. They're like, you don't understand. This is having a inverse effect. It's going to make Trudeau and the Liberal Party more popular. And I'm like, okay, like we got to do something.
Yeah,
to kind of make some corrections.
Trump will not play, or much less play, the typical liberal regime change. In other words, it'd be easy for us to covertly create utter chaos up there and color revolution Canada.
Right.
It would be, but that's not how they think of things. What they think of things is, hey, we want you to play ball. We have this very obvious and out in the open lever to use. So we're going to do things that way, not covertly like the Obama. Well, and honestly, the State Department did the exact same thing. Go look up what happened in Georgia, not our state,
right,
but in the Caucasus region, just south of Russia. We created great havoc there. And then Ukraine was a U.S. color revolution. We have Victoria Nuland on cell phone recorded naming all the ministry leaders and the leader of Odessa a month before the revolution happened.
Yeah.
And this, so anyway, that's not the way Trump thinks about things. And his leadership cadre think about things. This is overt and open, and therefore it's going to seem more Machiavellian. But in truth, it's like, look, these are our interests. This is what we want. If you don't want to play ball, that's fine, but we're going to keep this going. And that's just that's the way it's going to work.
Yeah. So
it's reality.
We got 25%. It sounds like the Mexico one is on pause. They were at 25%.
It is for 30 days because they made a good faith effort. They're going to put their military on the northern border to help search for fentanyl and control for immigration. But think about what that does in two ways. Okay. So that immediately, now you can say their military is compromised through Graf and all that, but that in theory pushes the plazas or the operating areas of the cartels, which they call them plazas, further south, right? And the further south they go, then they're more into areas that are more easily governed by Mexico City. So this is accomplishing several purposes. And then, we've kind of militarized the southern border, and if they've kind of militarized their northern border, and they step out of line,
what do you think's going to happen?
It can get kinetic pretty quick.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that.
No.
But you can see what's, this is great game. This is kind of back to great game politics. It's politics with a capital P, and it's, again, I don't ever want to see anybody hurt, but it's out in the open and good in that sense. Here's what we want. Here's what you want. Let's, show your cards.
That's right.
Let's do it. Right. So yeah. I find it quite refreshing.
Yeah. So so Mexico's on pause, Canada, 25%.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about it earlier with like a retail business you might have where you get products from Mexico or Canada. And I want to get to China in a second because there's lots we could talk about there. But what's like the short term kind of 3-month versus 12-month kind of look at this stuff? If Canada doesn't back down, which I think they would. Actually, I need to ask a question first, Ron. Is the 25% on both countries, is that going from 0 to 25%, or were there already tariffs imposed?
That's a good question. Hold on, I got a sneeze coming, so pardon me. That's a very good question. I did a long graduate level work on the maquiladora arrangement on the U.S. border, but that's a completely different. That was pre-NAFTA.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% certain. You look, the NAFTA arrangement was not completely free trade. I mean, it was I can't remember, 1,300 page document. So it's always been managed trade. Okay. A free trade agreement's easy. It's one paragraph, but we've never had that. And that's part of it's always going to be manipulated by the state. So just get okay with that, because that's reality. How this tariff is a blanket tariff, I think, on everything is moved up to this level. So I don't know. I'm just being honest. I don't know the details. No, what's interesting is, and let me see if I can pull this up because I was talking about it earlier today, is that you wouldn't believe the level of tariffs that were going on that Canada was charging on our goods and services. Golly, let me see if I can find that. I'm too online. But anyway, so for instance, dairy products from the United States are tariffed at 240 something percent into Canada.
Wow.
But this is and we've just kind of ignored it for a long time. And this is saying, look, it's a family show. That's horse hockey.
Sure.
So if we're going to play this game, look, we'll just slap you with the full 25 across the board. Now, here's the hard thing. Here's where it's going to make things hard for us in the short term if this doesn't get negotiated into something that looks more like 5 to 10%. For instance, we have a 10% tariff right now on everything out of China.
Okay. That's
reasonable. And then like a 100% tariff on like Chinese automobiles. That's why we don't see any in the United States. And that's because the U.S. auto industry has lobbied for that for a long time. But the supply chain out of Canada, this will make, there's a lot of auto parts that come out of Canada that have a very low tariff until today coming this way. So that's gonna be hard. So I think Mercedes, I read again, this was earlier today, but a lot of the auto companies, they do sub-assembly in Canada, in the Hamilton area. I know is a big area. That's a very industrialized area. And then outside of Winnipeg, I believe. So that will be, if this stays long-term, which I doubt, but we'll see, that will be painful. But again, the whole idea is, okay, then move some of those sub-assemblies to, we do a lot of auto manufacturing even a foreign, quote unquote, foreign cars. My wife drives a Mercedes, big, beautiful. It's lovely. You should see it. That car is built in South Carolina, I believe.
Okay.
Mercedes. So this all can get fixed. It takes time, but
yeah. So like with the short term, are we talking like if nothing gets negotiated down to like 10%, are we looking at like it's going to take 12 months of pain to get manufacturing back up to speed here in order to offset this cost? Because it sounds inflationary is what it sounds like.
Well, but think about it. It sounds inflationary, but inflation is a money supply issue, okay? Not a cost issue.
Okay.
Hold on just a second. Canadian tariffs. Let me see if I can find this this thing again. List of product. Anyway, I won't get distracted. I'll spurg out on that. What was the question again? The timing. That's a really good question. Manufacturing that's a boat that doesn't move around, doesn't turn on a dime. That's like turning around a cruise ship.
Right.
So what you look for is agreements in place, and then you grandfather those in. So if this doesn't happen by X date, we have this. Now, the problem is grandfathering agreements get treated by a lot of people as just a delay, and so they don't ever move on anything. So it's got to have real teeth. So I don't know. Okay. This is not something I do every day. I, again, read a little bit about it, familiar with the theory, the economic theory behind it, but I really don't know. And it's an art of the deal thing too. There's game theory involved. We don't want to destroy Canadian manufacturing. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to make things better this is a game theory thing. And so it is the point of view of the president, and I share this, that it's a little one-sided. Again, I just gave some examples of Canadian tariffs on our goods, and we have generally not been putting tariffs on anything. And so it's, can we make this somewhat equitable among what should be number one trading partner historically, and really a close ally instead of what's been over the last 10 years or so, kind of a thorn in our side.
Yeah. So you mentioned inflation. If we could, I'd like to talk about that.
You asked about inflation.
I wanted to ask about it because this is inflation seems really high. Everybody's looking for some scapegoat, somebody to blame.
Yeah.
All the liberals are like, see, eggs are still expensive. And Trump has the rhetoric of I'm going to bring prices down. And, my wife goes to the grocery store and she comes home and tells me, a dozen eggs are like $10, and over $10 in some cases. And that's surprising. That's alarming. And so we're seeing the price of goods go up, but you're saying it's unrelated to both the tariffs and other economic activities.
It's not unrelated, but so inflation prices can only go up so much as the market clears. So you still have to have willing buyers, otherwise prices don't go up. This isn't it's not an iron law that tariffs increase prices. They increase costs, and so they generally do increase prices, but only in so much that the demand for a good or service, and this is all goods, is inelastic. So what that means is something is inelastic. So drugs, for instance, have an inelastic demand. As prices go up, if I've got to have this to live, I'm going to pay whatever it costs, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's been abused by the drug makers because the inelastic demand and relative prosperity of United States healthcare consumers, healthcare, drugs, and healthcare in general has skyrocketed over the last 40 years in cost. But for instance, what would be the example of something that is luxury goods, not high end luxury, but kind of bourgeois to use a term, luxury goods tend to have a very elastic demand because people will just do without.
Sure.
If the costs go up. Oh, I don't need that Louis Vuitton purse that I go to the mall and I see people waiting outside in line for, people who don't look like they can afford the next meal. Explain that whole deal to me.
Sure.
I just won't. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of drug money that is being laundered through luxury goods. That's part of that deal. But anyway, so these cost increases only lead to inflation in cases where demand leans inelastic.
Okay.
So, will your maple syrup, your authentic Canadian as opposed to Vermont maple syrup, will the price of that go up? Well, it will until people stop buying it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know what I buy at Costco, which I don't even know if I should be shopping there anymore because they won't get rid of their DEI stuff. But
it's a very well run but very, very liberal company. I mean, I love Costco, but I have to turn my nose, so to speak.
Well, conservatives were trying to like claim it as their own because it's like the country club of grocery shopping where you have to have a membership and all that kind of stuff. And they make some good points there, but it's anyways, I go to there, I get the maple syrup, the big one, not the little glass jar. And I don't know, I guess I haven't looked at the label to see if it comes from Canada or Vermont. I just know I like my protein waffles and my maple syrup for breakfast. And
real maple syrup, man, that smell is something. That hot butter, maple syrup, and hot coffee.
Yeah. Great way to start the day.
That's some good stuff right there. Hold on, my doctor just called.
So the prices may go up, but okay. So then you talked about a money issue.
Yeah. Well, inflation is inflation truly is always a monetary phenomenon. So it is more dollars chasing fewer goods. It is not a cost because, again, the market won't provide. What we've done is we've imposed an increase in the cost of goods sold to the maple syrup manufacturer. We have not increased the retail price.
Right.
We've just said it's going to cost you $25 more or 25% more to get that to market.
Yep.
You do with that what you wish, or the retailers can do with that what they wish. For instance, I just saw I play guitar, and there's a very boutique guitar manufacturer. I say manufacturer, it's all handmade, electric guitar builder in Canada that has said, hey, look, we know that if we ship one of these to you, you're going to have to pay a 25% duty. So we're eating that.
Oh, wow.
On our end. So that's...
People can make that choice.
They absolutely can make that choice. So to close the loop on inflation, it's like everything else. There's a supply and demand for money itself. And if the supply of money goes up, chasing the same number of goods, then the price of those goods is going to go up for the market to clear.
Yeah.
Okay. It's when supply and demand cross, and that's not right wing or left wing. That's just
how it works.
For instance, you have chopped down a tree and you've got 3 cords of wood in your backyard, and you only need 1 cord for the next year for winter. You're going to sell 2 of those cords, but it turned out, and you were going to sell them for $100 each. Okay. I know that's probably cheap for a cord of wood. I don't know what a cord of wood goes for, but the day before you go and sell them, a helicopter that is full of money crashes over your village, and now everybody has $5,000 in their pocket.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to charge more or less for that same cord of wood?
More.
Why? Because there's more dollars chasing it. You're going to have people coming, oh, now I can afford that cord of wood who couldn't have before, right?
Sure, yeah.
Well, so all you're going to do is, okay, now it's $1,000 for the cord of wood, and that's inflation.
Yeah.
And so the inflation that we've seen in our economy over the last few years is because, as a response to COVID, we just pumped we can go into M1 and M2 and all these measures of liquidity, but we had zero interest rates, and 0% interest rates, what's called ZIRP, a zero interest rate policy. And we printed a ton of dollars, and we encouraged, because we had zero interest rates, foreign banks could create what were called euro dollars cost-free. So in other words, they could decide to denominate their foreign currency deposits in dollars because it cost them nothing. They didn't have to pay interest in dollars because we had a zero interest rate. So they created all these dollars, which inevitably, where do dollars get spent? Ultimately, in the United States. And on top of that, we shot ourselves in the gut, the head, the hip, with all these sanctions on one of the largest oil producers. What is oil transacted in worldwide? Dollars. That soaks up tons of these ridiculous policies that we do that are inflationary, creating all these dollars. Usually is the world soaks those extra dollars up like a sponge because they want to spend those dollars elsewhere because it's a stable currency. And they want to, but we said, oh, Russia and your little part of the world, which is a huge oil producing nation, you can't use dollars to do that anymore. So we cut off half the sponge. So again, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. It is more, it's more, whatever the inflation is being measured in, it's more of that currency chasing the same number of goods.
Okay, so then you mentioned China earlier. China, we have, I've seen a
10%.
I don't know if that's going up from 5, or I don't know where it's coming, but it's 10. Do you think
it's 10 right now, and that will be revisited? I mean, what we're going to do there is, I think you'll see China, U.S. Now we have a trade deficit with China, so that means we buy a lot more goods from China than they buy from us.
Right.
So it's that's a whole different ballgame. So I think that will be handled. That's much more of a tightrope to walk. But we are on a per capita basis. Our economy is regardless of what you've heard, is stronger than China, at least for now. And so we will use tariffs, I think, to very specifically and open produce policy goals in the sense of reshoring. In other words, we need a much higher percentage of the manufacturer of any good to be U.S. based, and we need to tighten up those rules as far as, a lot of games are played there. So all the parts will be, I won't get into that, but a lot of the same kind of thing we were talking about from Canada, except it's just a much greater magnitude from China. So we'll see that. We'll see what we'll really try to do is put a halt to any Belt Road initiatives in our hemisphere. And that gives the voting populace tired head, so they won't, this will be very difficult to talk about in a way that is understandable by Joe, six-pack. But the idea here is that the China exerts great geopolitical influence by offering liquidity and loans from their, for lack of a better term, it doesn't work the same way, but their central bank. Sure. So their central bank will buy dollars with renminbi and then give those dollars for the purposes of a project, and then they'll exert great pressure over that local government as that local, because debt is slavery. They'll owe that political capital back to Beijing, and we don't want that. So we will use, and this will be much more contentious. So we will use tariffs, I have a feeling, to say, hey, you don't even come close. And Panama's already backed out of their agreement with China.
I saw that, yeah.
But that's kind of what we're after in Brazil, Argentina, Central America, because we want hegemony over however you choose to say that word. I read that word before I started saying it. So
I do that a lot.
So we'll be saying, hey, look, this is our hemisphere. And the trade-off is, and we're going to have to be okay with this, is you're going to have a sphere of influence, China, that's over your deal. So we're going to have, and I mean, we gave this up under Obama. We knew what they were doing when the Spratlys, the South China Sea, that, there's not, everybody can talk all they want to about Taiwan. If China wants Taiwan, China's going to get Taiwan. We can make it painful, but we don't want to be in a war with China. Look, forget nuclear weapons. We could turn off the lights in China in 30 seconds. They could probably turn off the lights in the United States in 15. And that's just reality. So we're not going to go. So we're going to play, again, instead of those covert games, and there'll be some of that.
Sure.
We're going to play out in the open. Hey, look, this is what we want, and this is what we can do out in the open. We want you out of our hemisphere. Hey, look, what they're doing in fishing lanes off the coast of the east coast of South America, China consumes more fish than the whole rest of the world. And they are fishing the Pacific Ocean dry in what amounts to traditionally South American sovereign waters, fishing waters, which are different from international, rite of passage waters. So I think we're going to try to really say, hey, out of here on a lot of that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so kind of rounding out, I mean, we're coming at this from an investigation, like history, trying to educate, trying to get up to speed from you on tariffs, inflation, all these different matters, how it's going to affect consumers. Because I think what most Christians, they may not be hedge fund managers. They may just be working. One of the things that's going on that Trump's doing, I don't know how much you can speak to this, is it seems like he's gutting a lot of departments. And on the one hand, I'm very excited. I think the federal government is way too big and bloated, and a lot of the state economies and federal economies propped up, and they get a lot of votes that way, in my estimation. On the other hand, I know a lot of good Christians who are going to lose their job, especially in my parts where there's a lot of federal dollars coming for research and military and other purposes. So,
right.
When we have this glut of people being just cut from the federal government, do you think that's going to have some negative economic consequences because now all these people are out of a job? What do you think it looks like there?
Short term, I think you are, and that'll be dealt with once if unemployment starts to spike, and you see a GDP. I mean, ultimately, if the government is spending less dollars, I hate to break this to you, but over a third of our GDP is government spending. I mean, so it's totally fake. But it's how we calculate GDP.
Right.
So if suddenly, let's say they make their goal of gutting federal spending that is administrated through the executive branch. And look, Constitution is clear. Article 2 is clear. The president has control of the executive branch. Congress has tried to erode that over time, but I look forward to that constitutional fight because the Constitution is clear. But people need, again, this is chemotherapy. And so you have to determine in your own heart of hearts, whether or not the country is cancerous. And if you say, well, morally it's cancerous, but politically, I don't know, you do not buy the lie that politics and theology or politics and morality are separate. Every law is an expression of your theology. They are inexorably linked. They always have been, going back to the garden, and so you the speed limit. Let's just take that. The speed limit is expressed morality. You are endangering your fellow human being if you exceed this, even in safe and reasonable. Where is that? Is that in Montana too?
Yeah,
so, yeah. Yeah. So safe and reasonable. There is no speed limit. So it's a prudence issue. So prudence is obviously moral, right? hey, that guy kind of looked at my wife funny. Should I slug him? Well, that's an issue of prudence.
Right.
How funny did he look at her, and how big is he?
Right.
Am I going to be in worse? So so you can't separate those things. So in your heart of hearts, you have to decide, is America cancerous? And if so, it needs chemotherapy, and chemotherapy is like discipline right out of Hebrews. It is painful for the one being disciplined.
Well, I guess, yeah, thinking long term, I tend to agree, and I feel bad. I genuinely sympathy for people. I know people who have already lost their jobs.
Right.
But I agree with you that there's a cancerous, whether you want to call it the deep state, the cathedral, the regime, all these fun words that we could go into.
That's right.
There's something nefarious and something bad, and we got to fix it. My big
Right.
concern is going to be, how long can the American public endure the pain? Because
it's a question. That's a political question.
There's another election coming up in 2 years for seats, and there's another election for president coming up in 4. And I guess that's why he's going hard in the paint early, to try to start the treatment early, if that's his estimation. But I don't know how long the American public, if the unemployment goes up, the price of goods go up for American consumers. I don't know the tolerance of these people.
So the question becomes, if you're an NGO, you're probably SOL, pardon the vernacular, because that's not a government deal. I think government workers are being currently offered 9 months, something like that.
Some are, yeah.
So there's pretty good runway. If I'm self-employed, but if all my investors decided to leave and said, but hey, we're going to give you 9 months of fees, I'd feel pretty good about that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But this is the importance, and now has been far too long overlooked. This is the importance of churches and other institutions being patronage networks. And wait a minute, patronage networks, that sounds very old. Well, yeah. We all, as Protestants, we the Catholics kind of all do stuff together and hire each other, and Jews certainly have forever. We in tongue in cheek call it the tribe. They do. A&M is the same way, maybe even more so.
Yeah, dude.
Those are patronage networks.
Right.
And the church should be that. So, for instance, let's say somebody's been with USAID, and that is a evil organization that has done some good, and there's some good. Not every single person who's been involved with USAID is evil by any stretch. Just like not everyone who works at the National Institute of Health is evil, right? Even though we probably greatly disagree with the majority of the things that come out of there.
Right. Not
everybody who works in the federal government is evil.
Right.
That's not the case. But we need patronage networks, because in theory, if you're a Christian and you've done a good job and capable of good work, you should be able, if you've got people to come around you, to find let's find that hookup.
Yeah.
And that's very important. Churches need to be close enough with one another, not just go get your spiritual fix on Sunday, but really need to be your family. As Jesus said, look around, they're your brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And so that's been lost. We have a kind of a consumer look on church. I'm sure not at your church, Chase, but in a lot of them, a lot of mega churches, it's dealt with very contractually and very, very consumerishly, and that's not supposed to be the case.
Right.
And so this emphasis on patronage networks, I think, is one that has been lost for too long, and we need to get that back in gear quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think churches need to step up to the plate. Not just, I think many churchmen and pastors might think we're talking just providing financial assistance.
No, I'm not talking about that at all.
Right.
I'm talking about
real.
Hey, dude, that guy was doing ledger work over at this NGO, and they're done. But man, I need my payroll's a disaster. I could use some of that, and that guy could too. Maybe he can share time with both. He ends up better than he was before. It's that kind of thing where enough. I'm involved in an organization here in Dallas, a Christian organization where we help each other. Man, if somebody comes upon something hard because they're a Christian or because some mishap like this, man, we immediately band together and, hey, how can we place this guy?
Yeah.
And that needs to be not the exception, but the rule.
Yeah, that's great. I remember my dad talking about that growing up in Dallas and how, at certain churches you would go to, and it wasn't just about getting your spiritual needs met. It was about who you would be introduced to. And I used to think that was crass, and I think it could be. But
it can be.
I think there's a natural way that the church can be a trusted community of people where you're going to have similar values and you can support one another in your business and hire people within. And I think I absolutely agree. I think churches need to get stronger at this for sure.
It just makes your spiritual family more robust.
Yeah, totally.
It's not about handouts. Sometimes that's needed. Sometimes the deacons need to come together and, hey, we need to give this person some money or whatever. But men don't usually need handouts. What they need is family. Hey, what can I do?
Yep.
Now, the question, I would be shocked if this becomes, if this becomes an issue to where Trump's allies are experiencing, the type of people who voted for him, suddenly there's huge swaths of them out of work. I don't foresee that, by the way,
sure.
But if it does become an issue, I think this particular set of folks he's surrounded himself with will be very sensitive to that.
Yeah.
I don't, my concern would be the response would be too much, as it was with Biden in the response to COVID, than being too little.
Yeah.
I just don't see that being the case.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Ron, we've covered a lot of ground. There's so much more ground we could cover with you because I know you enjoy theology and all that kind of stuff, but I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today.
Oh, thanks, Chase. I really enjoyed it. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, it's great. Where can people keep up with you? You mentioned Twitter. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Where else can people kind of read or anything like that?
So at American Reformer, a wonderful publication that is generally Reformed Presbyterians and Baptists who have come together to promote good theology, but good how that applies to the political world and how we live before the face of God. So at American Reformer, Ronald Dodson. I'm Ronald Dodson on Twitter as well. And then Ron Dodson, my Substack is called The Eyes of Achilles.
Okay.
Achilles was mentioned at the end of Romans. And so always been kind of an inspiration. Here's this guy who will forever be in our scriptures that Paul just mentions as being faithful.
Yeah.
And so that's the main place. And I've started doing some more threads, explainers. For instance, I did an explainer on U.S. aid and that organization. I did a thread, another longer thread this morning on how to correctly view Plato and the Republic. So if you're really, really interested in such things, you can find those kind of things on Twitter.
Excellent. All right, Ron, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
You bet. Thanks, Chase.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Ronald Dodson. I know I did. I could have kept talking to him for a long time. Hopefully we'll have him back to talk about a variety of things. Let me know in the comments what you think was most interesting or what you'd like to hear more on, and we can always talk about that too. I wanted to remind you of a great product I use called Ion Layer. Ion Layer is a patch that has NAD plus kind of drip system where you don't have to use an IV. You can put the patch on. It's cleared by a medical doctor for your physical health, and these Ion Layer patches with the NAD+, they really enhance your mental acuity, your recovery after workout, help you with aging, because as you age, your NAD+ levels, which are naturally occurring in your body, they go down over age. And so these can help those levels stay current, stay active in your body. Head over to ionlayer.com, use code FPT to get $100 off your first kit. These are typically thousands of dollars, and Ion Layer brings them to you at a really affordable rate. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you don't see any difference, you can always get your money back. Head over to ionlayer.com, use code FPT, and get $100 off your first kit. All right, that's all for the program today. We will see you next time.